Hey guys, JLB Zombie here, and this is my review of... Wait, this isn't right. I'm invisible. Oh, well that's handy. How am I going to do a review if I'm invisible? Put me back right now! Well, that's never happened before. Anyway, hey guys, JLB Zombie here, and this is my review of the 1933 Universal monster picture, The Invisible Man. Let's get straight to it. Year after year, Universal Pictures were producing classic monster movies, and in 1933 came The Invisible Man, based upon the H.G. Wells novel. The story revolves around a scientist named Jack Griffin who develops a formula that makes himself invisible. However, the only downside to this is that he hasn't quite figured out how to make himself visible yet. Things spiral out of control for the townsfolk and Griffin himself when he slowly begins to lose his sanity and cause havoc. From his success from directing the 1931 movie Frankenstein, James Whale was brought on board to direct The Invisible Man. The movie stars Claude Rains in his monster debut, and this was also his first American screen debut performance. For today's standards, the effects in The Invisible Man may seem a little dated, but for 1933 the film was so ahead of its time. I was so amazed at what the makers of this film were able to do. And I have to say, out of all the essential Universal monster movies, The Invisible Man is definitely my favourite. Also, the film has a comedic element to it, and most notably from a character named Jenny Hall, played by Una O'Connor. She spends the majority of her screen time just wailing and screaming hysterically. I mean, don't get me wrong, it can get really annoying very quickly, but she's just brilliant. You may also remember Una O'Connor from another very, very popular Universal monster movie, The Bride of Frankenstein. Now I want to talk about Claude Rains as Jack Griffin, the Invisible Man. As much as I love his character in The Wolfman for playing Lawrence's father, and as much as I love him in The Phantom of the Opera, this, without a doubt, is his best role in all of the Universal monster movies. He's just absolutely incredible in this role. His voice is so villainous and he just brings 100% to the character that he is playing. We're introduced to Jack Griffin right at the start of the movie. He walks into a bar carrying a briefcase. He already looks very mysterious, wearing goggles, a hat and a long coat, but most notably covered in bandages. Now this is very much off topic, but whenever I think of a scientist covered in bandages, I don't immediately think of The Invisible Man. I think of Darkman, the Sam Raimi movie starring Liam Neeson. I might have to do a review on that movie one day because that's a great, great movie. It's a lot of fun. But back onto The Invisible Man. One of my favourite sequences in The Invisible Man is near the start of the movie after he's gone into the bar. He takes a room above the bar, upstairs, and he demands to be left alone. Whilst there, he's desperately trying to figure out how to make himself visible again, and he does so without saying a single word of dialogue. He's at a desk, head in hands, and you can tell what he's thinking. And what I love so much about the character is that the more that Griffin stays invisible, the more he begins to lose his sanity. And there comes a point later on in the movie where Griffin is going around town, and I guess you could say pulling harmless pranks on people. But what follows, he goes on to commit full murder. He could just go from A to B in a matter of seconds. At one point, he's in the bar, totally invisible, and he splashes ink onto a police officer's face. The next minute he's outside. As a person walks by, he takes their hat off of their head. And then suddenly, the next thing you know, he's tying one of the main characters up in the front seat of a car and having it drive off a steep hill, and when it hits the ground, it explodes. Not only that, he pushes people off of steep hills, having them fall to their death. But even that isn't the worst thing in my mind that he ever does. In my mind, the worst thing that he ever did in the film, the worst crime that he ever committed in the film, was that he derailed a train, which resulted in hundreds of deaths. Overall, Jack Griffin is a true villain. There's no which ways about it. He is a true villain. He even has outbursts of laughter, and they even sound like Cesar Romero's portrayal of the Joker from the Batman TV series. And funny enough, Mark Hamill, who also played the Joker in Batman the Animated Series, is a voice actor as well as an actor, and he actually took inspiration from Claude Rains' performance in this movie.
You draw from all different elements, because I was doing Claude Rains from The Invisible Man. Crazy? You think I'm crazy? I'll show you who's crazy.
Finding out more information for this review, I discovered that Claude Rains was not Universal's first choice to play the Invisible Man.
There was some uncertainty about who would play this part. Boris Karloff was set to, but he had a contretemps with the studio and walked off. So at one point, Whale asked Colin Clive if he would play it. And he said he was attracted to the idea, but wanted to get back home to England and turned it down.
It would have been interesting to see Karloff in the role, but to be honest, I don't think he would have played it the way Claude Rains did. Griffin in the film is not portrayed as having already been a monster before turning invisible. Rather, his insanity is explained away as the side effect of the formula. It's obvious that before he became invisible, he was a normal man, but with a hint of secrecy. Now, traditionally, most of the Universal monsters have some type of love interest, and in the case of the Invisible Man, there is Flora, played by Gloria Stuart. Gloria Stuart is most famous for her role in Titanic. She was also in The Old Dark House, also directed by James Whale. Flora is Jack Griffin's fiancée, and in my honest opinion, I don't think that her character as Flora brings much to the film. Instead, Flora feels like a distraction, an obstacle more than a benefit. Now, of course, one of the standout scenes in the film is where Jack Griffin reveals himself. He demands not to be disturbed when he's in the room above the bar, and when he is, the policemen and the townsfolk come into the room and Griffin demands them to stay back. The way that Claude Rains delivers his dialogue is simply amazing. I love the tone of his voice. He demands them to stay back and the policeman says, "Keep back, me," and at that point he stands up. From there, when he delivers his dialogue, he's angry and he's expressing himself and says, "You're crazy to know who I am, aren't you?" And then he says, "I'll show you." He removes his prosthetic nose, throws it on the table in front of everyone and says, "Here's a souvenir for you." I love the way he delivers that line. From that point forward, he then removes his goggles and takes off his bandages, revealing to everyone that he is invisible. From that point forward, he is absolutely insane. And the effects for this sequence were achieved by John P. Fulton, John J. Mescal, and Frank D. Williams, whose work is actually often credited for the success of the film.
It's relatively easy to film an invisible man when he has no clothes on. But when he has some clothes on, but only some, this presents a significant challenge.
Any portion of the actor that was to disappear was covered in black velvet, then photographed against a black velvet backdrop. When combined with a separate shot of the normal set, the illusion of invisibility was startling.
And the only time in the film where Claude Rains appears as Jack Griffin without any bandages is right at the end of the movie, where his face is slowly revealed through slow transitions. And for this effect, other than the transitions, the effects team had to create a mould of Claude Rains' head. And from my understanding, this was really uncomfortable for Claude Rains as he suffered with claustrophobia. But he never once complained during production. Also interesting to know that Claude Rains served in World War I and was unfortunately involved in a gas attack. This resulted in him losing 90% of his vision in his right eye. But not only that, due to the gas attack, Rains also suffered with permanent vocal cord damage, and from that point onward his voice would take more of a gravel-like tone. And in fact, this is exactly what James Whale heard during Claude Rains' screen test. Upon The Invisible Man's release, it became a smash hit and succeeded at the box office, making it Universal's most successful movie since Frankenstein. It is the most comedic out of all the Universal monster movies, but keep in mind this film is not a comedy.
It's not a comedy.
Oh.
The comedy element comes from Claude Rains' performance in some scenes, pulling harmless pranks on the townfolk.
Here we go gathering nuts and may on a cold and frosty morning. Whoops!
The film spawned sequels and spin-off movies, the first being The Invisible Man Returns starring Vincent Price, The Invisible Woman, The Invisible Agent, The Invisible Man's Revenge, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, and finally Abbott and Costello Meet the Invisible Man. In 2020 there was a modern remake which was tied into Universal's dark cinematic universe. But as for the original The Invisible Man from 1933, the movie overall is a cinematic masterpiece. It was so ahead of its time, and it achieved effects other than slow transitions that had never been seen on film before. There is never a dull moment in this movie. As soon as the movie starts, you want to know more about Griffin. His character just draws your attention span in, and whenever Jack Griffin is on the screen, you are fixated. You are so fixated by his character and Claude Rains' performance. And it goes without saying that Claude Rains gives his most iconic and best performance out of all the essential Universal monster movies that he has ever appeared in. And that is the reason why The Invisible Man, directed by James Whale from 1933, is my favourite out of all the Universal monster movies. So with all that said, that wraps up my review on The Invisible Man from Universal Pictures. I really hope you guys enjoyed the review. I really loved talking about this movie. And I hope you can join me for the next review, as I'll be continuing with the Universal monster movies and I'm going to be talking about The Bride of Frankenstein. So I hope you can join me for that review. If you liked the video, don't forget to leave a big thumbs up, I'd really appreciate it. Also, put some comments in the comments section of what you thought of the movie and what you thought of this review. Also, to stay notified, why not click that notification bell down below so you get notified when I upload future content. And on that note guys, I will see you in the next video, and as always, take care.